comes to race, we know the words we should not use, but the right words can be difficult to find. So we don't speak about it, and misunderstandings persist. Tonight, we take a step toward breaking the silence. 6 people spend 60 minutes in A Conversation for Change, a Detroit 2020 interactive special, which begins right now.
And good evening. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight. I'm Stephen Clark.
And I'm Carolyn Clifford. Tonight we are tackling race. Often it is the elephant in the room.
Yeah, certainly people are afraid they're going to step on somebody's toes, hurt somebody's feelings, or even worse.
Well, tonight we are joined by 6 panelists from Metro Detroit, each with a unique background and perspective for an open and honest conversation about race.
Joanne Purton and Diana Lewis also will be joining us tonight. Joanne moderating a live chat on Detroit2020.com right now, where you can send in your questions right now.
And Diana will have special reports throughout the hour. So let's get started by introducing tonight's guests.
Racism is absolutely holding us back.
It's a topic that can make it or break it for our region.
Almost everybody's just beating around the bush.
Our panel members come to the discussion of race with 6 different perspectives.
We have to stop talking about race and start talking about people.
There's no such thing as race in a scientific sense.
All you're actually getting from the younger generation is just a new perspective, because we don't carry the bag.
Leandro Ladd is founder of Michigan Taxpayers Alliance. This political activist blames government for making race relations worse by giving preference to people based on race.
And when the government continues to reinforce the perception that we are different and that our differences are based on our skin tone and our race, through having these programs that are not socioeconomic based, they are actually hurting the progress.
Maha Freej is Deputy Executive Director of Access, the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services. She was the first Arab Palestinian woman to earn a CPA in Israel. She came to the United States in 1989, but she now feels this country is making it tough for Arab Americans.
We can be looked at as possibly being a terrorist or an enemy of the state.
As president and publisher of the Michigan Korean Weekly, Tak-Young Kim is in the business of communication, and he has seen the problems that can be caused by misunderstandings.
We have some conflicts between the owner of the Korean businesses with the employees, or also with the customers. So that's not because we hate each other, but because we don't know how to communicate.
Free Press columnist Rochelle Riley has won awards for her communication skills. She has the opportunity to share her ideas with thousands of readers, but welcomes this chance to talk with 5 other people.
For once and for all, maybe we can talk about who we are and not be afraid of any of those things.
Osvaldo Rivera has spent decades working for social change. He says people talk about race, but usually within their own ethnic group. That, he believes, needs to change.
If it isn't done, it will continue to fester. And that's the key word, fester, without resolution.
The youngest member of our group is 29-year-old Jordan Wolf. He's a director of Community Next, an initiative started by the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit.
How do we actually create solutions and start breaking down those barriers that have been built for decades?
Leon, Maha, Tak, Rochelle, Osvaldo, and Jordan. Let's talk.
So let's jump right in. We want to ask each and every one of you, what is the biggest stereotype associated with your culture?
I'll start over here with Rochelle.
That we are criminals who don't like education, which is one of the most offensive things about African Americans, who had to fight twice as hard to actually be educated, starting with it being illegal to teach former slaves to read, to founding universities and fighting for every chance to become a part of America and to achieve the American dream. It really is a shame. But having said that, there are people in every culture who don't believe in those things. We just have to stop assigning them to a particular group based on race.
All right, Tak-Young Kim, let's go to you.
Well, many people think that Korean people are not smiling enough and rude and then not honest. But that's because there is the language barrier. That we have lack of skill communicating each other in expressing our feeling.
Okay.
Jordan.
In the Jewish community, I think the biggest stereotype is that if you're Jewish, you're attached to money. And just because you're Jewish, that you have access to a lot of financial resources.
Maha?
Well, in our case, it's something that has to do with a big global situation that our country is engaged with. The Arab American community is defined by the acts of literally a small number of people who carried attacks on September 11 against our country. So we've been defined by a man called Osama bin Laden and this whole terrorism. And the sad part about it is really that, the simplicity of discussing what happened in September 11 and the generalization of painting an entire group of people as such, just because of the acts of a small number of people, is not only insulting but extremely sad. And I want to say one more thing, that this really leads into demonization of an entire group, which allows for invading countries, it allows for imprisonment of people, it allows for all kinds of things because it's okay to do so. One thing I want to say, that just to break it to everybody, we don't have a gene that's called terrorism or anything like that. We want what everybody else wants, regular stuff.
All right, Maha, we're going to keep going.
Osvaldo, we'll call you Ozzy this evening.
Yes, thank you. Well, there are many stereotypes, and I guess if you kind of lump them together, they have the sentiment that we don't belong here, Latinos, that we're not American. Yet, there were Spanish-speaking cities and states well before the formation of the United States, and that we're not American in our thoughts and our beliefs. Yet we have contributed to American culture. You cannot have rock and roll and jazz without that Latin tinge, and that's just one example. And I want to piggyback on what Maha mentioned about the demonization. This anti-immigrant sentiment, it has gone in the era of demonization, so that all Latinos are kind of painted as being undocumented when the majority are not, and thus racial profiling comes along with that.
Ozzy, thanks.
Leon, we're going to give you the last word.
I'm not sure which community I should be representing. I'm part of a Facebook community, a political community, an activist community, a professional community. I belong to a tremendous amount of different communities, and I don't feel qualified to talk on behalf of a white community. That's just not the way I look at life.
So you don't feel the white community is ever stereotyped at all?
They might be, but I'm not here to speak on behalf of white people. The cultures that I interact with are a myriad of cultures that I select based on the type of individuals within them. And I don't have a culture I select based on people who are white.
Okay.
Before we continue our conversation for change, let's take a closer look now at the racial makeup of Metro Detroit. There have been some significant changes here in recent years.
And Diana Lewis breaks down the figures from the 2010 census. Take a look.
We have the reputation of being the most divided area in the nation. But in fact, metropolitan Detroit is becoming a bit more integrated. In Wayne County, the 2010 census shows about 52% of the population is white. 40.5% is African American, 2.5% are Asian, and 5% of the population is made up of Hispanics of any race. In Oakland County, 77% of the population was white in 2010. 13.5% was African American, more than 5% was Asian, and Hispanics made up 3.5%. The statistics for Macomb County show 85.4% of the residents are white, 8.6% are African American, 3 times as many as 10 years earlier. Less than 1% are Asian, and more than 2% are Hispanics of any race. And in the city of Detroit, about 10.5% of the population is white. Almost 83% is African American. A little more than 1% of the population is Asian, and Hispanics of various races make up nearly 7%. The question is, will Detroit continue to be primarily a one-race city as the suburbs become more diverse over time?
All right. Diana. Thank you.
As we mentioned at the top of our show, our Joanne Burton is hosting a live web chat right now and taking your questions from home.
Joanne joins us right now, live from our control room. And Joanne, what's happening there online?
We've already got a great spirited conversation going on Detroit2020.com. So if you are not there while you're watching this at home, head to Detroit2020.com and you can take part in this. We really want, you see it right there. We've got a whole lot of comments so far. Someone just right off the bat, right when the show started, wrote, I liked this. It's from Garrett there. Hopefully this show will really change the way Detroiters think of each other. I'm a young person who wants to learn and change and be different from my parents. And then as soon as the panelists started talking, we started getting some feedback as well. So again, we invite you to join us. As we do, you can leave your comments on Detroit 2020's Facebook and Twitter sites as well. We'd love you to be part of this tonight. On our website as well, Detroit 2020, we're going to be posing questions to you so that you from home can respond. We want to know how you feel about race relations beyond just the dialogue. So we're going to start right here with this question first. Again, that you can answer at the website. Have you personally experienced racism? If you go to Detroit2020.com, you'll have an options, multiple choice type question. You can fill in which group you think experiences the most racism. Throughout this hour, we will be sharing the results to the poll questions. But we have also received dozens of emails over the last week and throughout the day from people who wanted some very specific questions answered. We want to share some of these with our panel tonight because I think they're going to spark some good conversation. Drew in Northville sent us an email. He brought up a point that we want to share with you. He says, what is it about some people that dislike everyday black folks but go to a Pistons game and ask Ben Wallace for his autograph or love the Lions, MSU, or U of M football teams? Do they realize that the majority of the people they cheer for on Saturday or Sunday are black people? They say we need, or he says rather, we need to change the culture of the I don't want to live by them or don't want my sister or daughter to date one. But in the same breath, they say I love hip hop and R&B music and Jay-Z or Lil Wayne is my favorite rapper. Last time I checked, they were black too. Again, that was Drew from Northville weighing in, and I would just like to throw that idea out to the panel and get their response. What do they say to what Drew has to say about that issue?
All right, Joanne, interesting question. We'll start. Leon, just real quickly, is that a fair generalization, first of all?
Well, people are excellent at holding contradictory views within their own minds. And people do it all the time. They want less government, but they want the government to pay for their college. You know, and so there's yes, I'm sure that a lot of people there hold contradictory views. They have racial stereotypes that they continue to hold. At the same time, they break them down in other areas of their lives. People have a long history at holding contradictory views.
Rochelle, you want to weigh in on this? Sometimes it's about money when you're going to sporting events like that, but
sometimes people rise above what the regular race discussion is. You know, our superheroes, our superstars, our celebrities, our basketball players. And I think it's kind of a shame because what we do is we miss some of those superstars in our own community, some of those great teachers, people who are musicians like Ozzy right here. I wish that, you know, we talked about this, well, we've talked about this a lot. Race is the most talked about. I mean, this is literally the conversation for the, but we're not having the conversation. We're having lots of little conversations. And I just want us to stop having the race conversations as a spectator sport and talk about people. Talk about why it is that we can look at somebody and see or assume something as soon as we see them.
The implication of that question, I think, is that the white community are the ones that go to the basketball games and they idolize the sports players and musicians. Is this something that happens in all groups? You're nodding your head over here.
I'm sorry.
You're nodding. It is something that happens in all groups, that there is kind of a slotting of where you are in relation to other people of different ethnicities.
Well, I think when it comes to having ideas about the other, it's normally driven by lack of communication with the other and lack of knowing the other. That's when you assume all kinds of things about whoever that other group is. And when it comes to also how the issues are talked about, there is a lot of hype usually around stories that are negative, around fear. I mean, you don't hear a lot when you wake up in the morning. You don't hear a lot of stories about something good that happened in one of Detroit's neighborhoods. I'm still waiting to hear something like that. You always hear about the fire that happened, right. You know. So I think that collectively, there has to be an effort that brings the communication barrier down by bringing something positive to the table so people can think about it in a different way.
Absolutely. Let's get one other person to weigh in on this, because we're really talking about, I mean, is it racist when you think that we have all of these superstars? Because really that's what we're talking about on a basketball court. And then when you go to your own neighborhood, it's fine to watch them on the basketball court. They're millionaires, there's fine. But when it comes to your sister marrying them, your daughter marrying them, or living next to them, you really don't want to take part in that. You sort of, you know, push them away. I mean, is that what we're talking about here? I mean, that's what the comment was on the email?
I think for some folks it clearly is. For other folks, there has been some integrative work and relationship building. So it's a continuum, and it depends on the situation. But far too often it's the case that you mentioned. And I want to go back to the point that Maha brought up about communication and dialogue. And you also brought that up, Rochelle, earlier. It has to be prolonged. It can't be a short 1 hour conversation like we're trying to do here. This conversation needs to instigate something that's long term, that looks at the issue in different ways. You get to talk to different people. Each community that we represent is diverse in its own. So I can't say that I represent all Latinos. Right. I can give you a window into that world. So you need to talk to me. You need to talk to other members in my band. I'm Puerto Rican. You need to talk to a Central American, a Mexican, etc. And that dialogue has to go for, has to be a lifelong challenge.
So on a daily basis, we need to get to know each other and get to know different cultures.
So on that note, we are just getting started here and for a long time with this conversation for change.
Up next, proof that racism is alive and well. Tonight, you're going to hear one woman's heartbreaking story of harassment, and our panel will share their own.
Stay with us and go online right now, but we'll be right back.
Closed Wednesday till noon to mark down prices for the 10 plus 10 plus tax sale. From noon to 10 p.m., save up to 65% store-wide. Plus, take an extra 10% off the sale price and no tax on all sofas, living rooms, dining rooms, bedrooms, and mattresses. Plus, our entire new fall collection is on sale. Wednesday, for 10 hours, you'll save an extra 10% off the sale price plus no tax at Art Van's 10 plus 10 plus tax sale.
You're simply the best! My name's Charlie. I work at DTE Energy's Monroe Power Plant. We produce enough electricity here for nearly 2 million homes and businesses. But even we have to look for ways to save energy. Find out what you can do at home to save energy and money by logging on to DTEenergy.com. You'll find all kinds of ways to be energy efficient, even energy calculators that show your savings add up to in dollars and cents. And that makes a lot of sense. I can help.
Your friend told you they love their pilot. You read about how reliable Hondas are, and still, you waited. What if I told you the Odyssey was a 2011 top safety pick? Or that Kelley Blue Book rated the CR-V highest resale value, and you can get a great deal on all three? Still not convinced? Well, that's when you go from shrewd consumer guy to weird moon landing denier guy. Don't be that guy. Come see the wide selection and great offers at your Honda dealer today.
When you're from the city, your day in court isn't the same as for the rich and privileged. In the real world, you're on your own, alone, up against a system that already thinks you're guilty because of who you are and where you're from. The courtroom should be a place where your wrongs are righted, where justice prevails no matter who you are. In the courtroom, who's going to stand up and fight for you? We will.
The generalization here. Over the years, most of the racial confrontations have been between whites and blacks. At least that's what a lot of people believed. But people of other ethnic groups are also the victims of hateful comments.
One young Arab woman told us about an incident that happened to her as she shopped at a local store during the 4th of July holiday weekend.
We walk in and I turn around and I see someone screaming stupid. I didn't think they were talking to us, so I turn around and they're like, stupid again. I'm like, excuse me? She's like, you're in the United States of America. Take that damn towel off of your head. It's like we turn around and we're like, exactly, ma'am. We are in the United States of America. couple other people start walking towards her, and they're screaming terrorist and take that towel off of your head. We pretty much just turned around and walked right out of my ears and just left.
Now, of course, this woman walked away, but is there something she could have done, or was this the best solution? Has anyone in this room experienced something similar?
I'll start over on this side with Leon, first of all.
You know, most incidences of discrimination and racism aren't that blatant. Most of the time you don't even know, I suspect, when you've been discriminated against or when you've been denied an opportunity because of your race, or people have treated you differently. I can only think of very limited incidences where I feel that I suspect I was treated differently based on my race, going to a restaurant in my 20s in Pontiac with a group of young white friends, and it was a black restaurant, or at least had black staff, and not being served in any way. That's incredibly unusual, I think, for me, in my experience. I'm sure it's different for people who are perceived as minority groups.
Right.
Maha, let's talk to you, because, you know, we've done so many stories in the news about hijabs. This, you know, I mean, it's not appropriate to call it a towel, but, I mean, she was definitely discriminated against, and those were hateful comments. Was she right in just walking away, or?
I think that she should have stood up. However, I will share a story about myself, because when you are in the middle of it, especially if you are an immigrant, you may have wished that you could have done something different than what you did when you were faced with a particular act. You know, after September 11, my youngest son was in first grade, and he went to a private school. And I had a phone call. It was like a couple of days after September 11 by his teacher. I was half asleep. It was 9:30 maybe, and she knows us very well. She went to school with my husband, and she said, I want you to give you some heads up. Omar has been talking in the playground, so he's been saying that he knows how to do a bomb and that he can blow up the entire neighborhood. And the kids, one of the kids went and told the parent, and the parent came to the administration of the school, and she was preparing us, so just in case somebody talked to us. And the way I dealt with it, I'm the immigrant here, I was defensive. I was like, I wanted to prove to her that, you know, I don't know where he's coming with this from, like, we are not like that. I really thought that they will come and take us that night to Guantanamo. I was so scared, while my husband, who grew up in this country, came in, and I told him what happened, and he said, why are you go back to sleep? I mean, it's all the stupid cartoons he's watching. Let somebody tell me I'm not American enough. And that was an eye-opener for me. The way I dealt with it, the way I was defensive about it, it was totally different than the way my husband dealt with it. And that brings how immigrants may deal with the situation.
Gotcha.
Rochelle?
Oh, thank you, because I was ready.
I saw that.
My American dream is to live in the sort of innocence and lack of hatred that Leon does. When you can say, you know, that's not something that's a part of my life, or I don't really experience a lot of that. That is what my hope is for my children, for my children's children, and their children and their children. God, that would be awesome. But I can tell you that two things happen for me. Well, actually, it happens all the time. Every single time there's a crime, somebody asks me, oh, do you know them? Or, oh, is that somebody we know? Oh, yeah. Am I wrong? I mean, this happens. But the other thing is, 7 years ago, I decided to change my hair. And I said, I'm not going to do the chemical sort of thing, you know. This is what I look like without all of the stuff. And you would be amazed by the reaction. Black people, not all of them, some of them, called and said, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing something to your hair?
We're looking at a picture of the way you were before and the way you are now.
I had this sort of, what I called it a school teacher bouffant, you know, when I got here, this sort of, and I looked like my mom. Well, when I started to look like me, black women particularly would call the paper and say, don't do that. You have got to go back and do your hair. White people would treat me like I was somebody different. Like I'd walk in a store and all of a sudden I was more African than American.
Because you had
Because of the, it was amazing to me. And I think that part of it is we literally are looking at people and assuming who they are instead of trying to get to know people.
Exactly. Well, 20 years ago I arrived here as a student, and I had an accent. I still have an accent, but so...
No, you don't.
Thank you. So, I mean, whenever I have to get service, or when go to the store, I felt I was ignored because, and then they kept questioning to me, even though they understand what I'm talking about. They keep asking, what
did you say? What did you say?
Yeah. So they got me really discouraged. So, and so some people just grab their nose because I smell something. I mean, they smell something from me, or that was the experience that I had. So, to survive that environment, even in Ann Arbor situation, I try to wear nicer. And I didn't use any perfume in Korea, but I use perfume here in America to not be offensive to anybody near me.
So
was that the right thing to do, though?
Right.
So to fit in.
Yeah. So I was trying to adapt myself.
But should you have, or should you have just gone about being who you are?
Yeah, I was, but still, I respect the etiquette you have. I mean, the social system you have. Not trying to stand out, but I just want to learn the American style.
I understand.
That's what the immigrants are going through.
All right, we're going to ask you guys to pause here in the studio because we're going to toss it up to Joanne.
I've been watching a little of the stream here on Twitter here, Joanne. I know people are weighing in.
Yeah, they really are. They've got so many opinions about some of what the panelists are saying, and just about race and issue. I found it interesting if we look at our conversation going on the Detroit2020.com website right now. We had a Sassy Wing, and I'm so tired of the race issue. She says, people are people. Skin color, shape of eyes has nothing to do with being a good person or with being I believe it's a jerk there with a typo. The next one, a comment was, in a perfect world, skin color would not be an issue, but of course, we do not live in a perfect world, and of course, that's why we're having the conversation we are tonight. A little bit earlier, we asked you the poll question that we had, and it was, have you yourself experienced racism? Got a couple poll questions going, but regarding that one, the results so far, 84% of the people who have weighed in said that indeed they have experienced some form of racism. Only 16% tonight weighing in said they have not. Want to ask our next interactive poll question to you that you can also find on the Detroit 2020 website as well right now. What group do you think experiences the most racism? Again, you can weigh in. We've got Asian, Black, White, Arab, or Hispanic, and getting a wide variety of answers there, but we'll give you the results to those coming up in just a few minutes. We're also getting a lot of questions coming in, as we told you earlier, some emails and some comments, and I wanted to share this one. Nancy wrote to us from South Lyon, and she sent us this question. I don't understand how the blacks get away with having black schools and black organizations, but it's not right for the whites to have their own. Why do we have to have segregated anything in this day and age? I throw it down to the panel to take a shot at that one.
Leon, you want to tackle that one first?
I think I agree with Rochelle. We want to get to a place in our culture where, in our society, where we don't have segregated things. And I think it is. I hope that we're moving quickly past the time where we feel that we've got to have segregated things, and we could just move into a world where we don't have, a black this, a Hispanic that, a white this, a white restaurant, a black restaurant. We just have individuals that
Ozzy, is this possible?
Well, I talk from being a light-skinned Puerto Rican with African heritage, and I see the impact this had on my darker-skinned relatives. Mm-hmm. And because I'm light-skinned, a lot of people assume I'm white, I hear all kinds of things. And from an early age, I was real sensitive to the issue of race, because my uncle, who was only 9 years older than me, lived with us, and he was dark-skinned, black in all kind of contexts. Mm-hmm. And I saw him go through a number of incidents that were definitely racial based. And when I was 12 years old, he told me, I'm going back to the island of Puerto Rico, and I felt like I was losing my big brother. He says, you're white, I'm black, I can't live here.
Wow.
Rochelle, real quickly, because we need a quick response here, but I mean, the NAACP, it was started more than 100 years ago. I mean, have we reached a time when we don't need African-American organizations, when before we had nowhere else to go?
People ignore the history. The NAACP was founded because black people were being lynched.
Exactly.
Fraternities and sororities were founded because black people couldn't be in the fraternities and sororities that existed. When things get better, you don't throw away your history. So they're not bad because they're separate.
But can you see that there are people who think that is divisive, that it's not inclusive?
It's only divisive if they don't remember that there's a Daughters of the American Revolution, or there are other groups.
We can remember and change at the same time.
Yeah.
Just because it was part of our history doesn't mean we should hold on to it. But sometimes it's time to move on.
But the question was, why do blacks have their own organizations, their own school boards? Whites do too. If we're living in a segregated society, if there's a totally black system, guess what? There's a totally white system. So whites have it too. What's at the bottom of it? What is the issue? So you point to blacks or Latins because they're segregated, it means they were segregated from the rest of society. You can't have one without the other.
Right. As you can see, we have a lot to talk about, and we're not done yet.
Certainly not. Up next, we'll be talking about President Obama, why some believe his presidency has created even more racism here in America.
We'll be right back.